And it isn't. It is a huge labour from the director's point of view. He has to build every corner of that screen. Every detail has to be as near perfect as he can get it.
The so-called New York Street is sort of like a series of 3 different legs, which would mean 6 sides of the street, and we were going to do all of it.
And I was standing on this crossroads thinking, well, it's not very big. And I got the production designer, Larry Paul, and then Sid Mead, and I got photographs taken of every side of the street and laid them out around the room, blew them up around the room. And basically Sid and Larry started to construct the sides of the city.
It was so dense with detail and texture that you could shoot elements onto the street in various areas and go from point A to point B to point C to point D and never know where you're at.
So we're here on the old New York set at Burbank. Talk us through where the Blade Runner locations were.
Over there is where we did the Zora chase through the shop front.
Where the Art Deco
Where the Art Deco is now. It was a shop front with a plate glass. Over here is the Leon Hotel.
Just up there?
Yep. Over there is Mr. Chu's shop.
Oh, this is Chu's Ice House.
This is the Ice House.
Okay. And then straight ahead of us, right down there, that's the night scene. What happens
down there? There's the night
there?
scene where the midgets come through and the masses of people coming through at night with the Hare Krishnas. And as you can see over here, because there's so much greenery and mountainside, that was one of the main reasons why we decided to shoot at night, because we could eliminate having to mat out the green mountains and the trees.
Because if you look down the end of the street, you can just see glorious hills.
Exactly. And just over here on the corner was the phone booth. There was no stairs here, there was just a phone booth in where Batty made the phone call before the I-Man.
So how far down was this set dressed as Blade Runner? Was it everywhere you can see?
We took over everything.
You arrived onto the set and you're transported. Your job as an actress is so easy because you're already in some place that's absolutely, magical, absolutely from somebody's imagination.
The premise was that, in my design sort of mind, that with these enormous structures going up 2,000, 3,000 feet, decent people never went below the 60th floor. So you had these big pylons and supporting the architecture. And the street then became like a basement, essentially, an urban basement.
Sid is this wonderful combination of artist and practitioner and sociologist. He can talk for hours about the logic of urban planning, urban decay, and sociological decay and disorder. And so I introduced him to the deal because I saw the book and thought, that's really interesting, and this guy's got his finger on what could happen and where it's liable to go.
As well as the Warner backlot, Blade Runner also took in and transformed a number of existing locations in and around LA. Union Station, for example, became Police HQ, where Captain Bryant first sets Deckard on the trail of the errant replicants. This Frank Lloyd Wright designed house in Los Feliz doubled as the first floor exterior of Deckard's apartment. As he wends his weary way home, Blade Runner's bedraggled hero drives his sedan through the 2nd Street Tunnel, which runs between Hill and Figueroa, and which looks as eerily exotic in real life as it does in the film.
Describe in single words only the good things that come into your mind about your mother.
Most famously, Blade Runner also utilised this, the legendary Bradbury Building, just across the street from the $1 Million Theatre on Broadway in downtown LA. It's here that Pris holds up with her only human friend, J.F. Sebastian, and where Deckard finally comes face to face with Roy Batty. The Bradbury was designed at the end of the 19th century by George Wyman, who'd been inspired both by messages from a Ouija board and by the architecture of Edward Bellamy's futuristic novel Looking Backward, set incidentally in the year 2000. It was the perfect location for Blade Runner's retrofitting process, through which buildings would come to embody the synthesis of past, present and future.
I found out before I left, in the beginning of pre-production, that he'd gone to the Bradbury building to look at that. And I said, really, that's ridiculous. Every TV show in the world has used that building. And that's a bad idea. Don't use that building. And he said, not the way I'll use it. And I thought, what arrogance. And I was so wrong. That means he knew what he talked about, that he could make that a spectacular moment in the movie.
I love to work with illustrators and storyboard artists and really the best production designers I can lay my hands on, because that's where the fun is. And that's when you start firing off an idea and then they fire back and suddenly the whole thing starts to generate this environment, which is fascinating.
The biggest challenge was the Voight-Kampff machine. Deckard brings it with him into Tyrell's office and so forth. So it had to be a suitcase, briefcase size thing. And in my mind, it had to be terrifying. And this machine was breathing because it would inhale the air, the localized air between the interviewer and the interviewee, and process that and pick up, acidic traces and so forth, much as animals do, because animals can smell if you're afraid.
While Sid Mead's Voight-Kampff machine was tasting the futuristic air, the cast and crew of Blade Runner found themselves unwillingly inhaling smoke and fumes on sets whose atmosphere pushed tolerance to the limits on a 24-hour basis.
The conditions we were shooting in were so unbearable. It was boiling hot, it was wet, it was damp, it was everybody was sitting in their underwear shooting, and Ridley would finish shooting and just walk off.
We shot for, I think, something like 5 months, and I think almost all of it was night shoots. I don't remember ever seeing the light of day except for the last few minutes on my drive home.
Oh man, the crew was walking around with surgical masks on. I mean, you would think you were down in a coal mine. This was Ridley's dream and Ridley's vision, and he would not back off, and all the powers that be on top of it, there was enormous pressure going on.
I didn't know anyone in LA, and they didn't know me, which is worse. So the process of saying, no, I don't want it that way, I want it that way, took longer, and that's how we got behind.
We wouldn't know anything, we wouldn't get any word of anything, and it would take hours to reset the shots. And through one's own volition, you started to super exceed what you were capable of. And all the running stuff was phenomenal, and that went on for nights. We just kept going and going and running and running. I mean, I don't know how I didn't break bones in that. All the jumping and jumping on the cars and knocking guys down.
Hey! Get out of the way!
I could feel the pressure almost all the time that I was on the set. Possibly one of the worst pressure conditions I have ever been in.
I just do eyes. It's just eyes, genetic design.